In Catilinam 2.9. Just wanted to go over this sentence one more time because it really is fascinating. And the first thing I'm going to do is split it in half. And you'll find often, not just in Latin, but particularly in coding, if you have a big problem, split it in half. Take the two halves, split them in half, and so forth, just creating a sort of a binary tree approach to solving problems. So we've got this if right here. So we know that this is a conditional. Conditionals have two parts. So it goes from here all the way over to about here. That's part number one. That's the if part. You can pretty much tell because we've got si comprehendi, si interfici usero. So we've also got this, worth noting, helps catch the eye so we know what's going on here. Anaphora, repetition, which helps us kind of keep track of what's going on in the sentence. All right, that's our first part, and then this bit here, that's part two. So now we've got it split in half. So the if part, si comprehendi. If I catch. If I will have ordered. This is called the protasis. This is the conditional part of the conditional. Then, if the if part is true, then the then part is true, as you know from logic, and that part is erit verendum. Okay? This is commonly known as the conclusion of a conditional. Or in classical studies, this is the apodosis. So it's just, Greek terms versus English terms there. So there's an if. If the if part is true, then the conclusion is true. That's how logic works. Now, let's grab a verb here. Where's big V? Here's big V. That's first person singular, perfect active, indicative. Here's big V here. And this one is, look at this, future perfect. Wow. So we've got perfect active, and we've got future perfect here. An interesting interplay of the tenses. They're both first person singular. All right. Now this looks like it might be first person, but it isn't. This happens to be the present passive infinitive. And that is because of usero. If I will have ordered that you be killed. So this te becomes, I better use my colors here, do. It's the do of comprehendi, right? However, it's also the subject of interfici, because we get subject accusative verb infinitive in indirect statement. Indirect statement. I will have ordered that you be killed. So that one goes like this. See, te interfici usero. If I will have ordered that you be killed. Subject accusative, verb infinitive there. Indirect. Direct. Statement. And that's all within the conditional part of the sentence. Here comes the conclusion of the sentence. And here's our big V, our verb. And this is future passive periphrastic. One of my favorites. The future passive periphrastic is some form of the gerundive. And the gerundive has nd, gerundive, and then a form of the verb to be. So there's the verb to be. And this gives a sense of passive obligation. Oxymoronic, isn't it? It has to be feared. Not only is this a gerundive in a passive periphrastic with a sense of passive obligation, it is also impersonal. In other words, it doesn't really have a subject. It must be feared by me. This is the dative of agent, which is what happens when you have a passive periphrastic instead of the ablative. Then, inside the passive periphrastic comes this. Ne non, boom, boom, boom. So, this is a verb of fearing. Erit verendum. Clause of fearing. And you think, well, why do we have to have a clause just for fearing? Because of the conjunctions that govern it. Strangely, in Latin, they do things the flip-flop of how we do them. When you fear something, you introduce a negative conjunction. So you say, I'm afraid that not something will happen, which means you're afraid that it will happen, because English flips it around. When you express your fear in Latin, you express your wish, actually, which is that the thing not happen, which is exactly what a fear is. A fear that something you don't want to happen will happen. So, in this case, Latin just goes a different direction from English. So then, when you also introduce non after ne, you do get a negative fear. So the thing that's going to be feared by me is not that. The simple approach to this is just to say that ne equals that in English, and ut, which you have in some fearing clauses, equals that not. So resort to this if you're completely confused by this reversal of negatives here. So I've got to be afraid, not that, and then there's a big comparison here, and this is just gorgeous. So the way you get through this is by sound. Erit verendum mihi, ne non hoc podius omnes boni serius a me, quam crudelius factum esse dicat. Serius parallels crudelius. And podius works with quam. The Romans would hear that. Podius quam means rather than, which means we've got a comparison going on here. And that is why we have comparative adverbs. There they are. Two comparative adverbs being compared by podius quam. And factum esse, this works with both. Ame works with both of these parallels. And omnes boni, all the good men, we're going to talk about the politics of that particular statement, is paralleling quisquam. So omnes boni, all the good men rather than anybody. So all versus anybody, plural versus singular. And this is the main verb, kind of a little v here because this verb is inside of the clause of fearing. So to be afraid that anybody say this was done more cruelly, rather than all good men say, and so really there should be a decant here, plural, to match omnes boni, that all the good men say it was done too severely, too late by me. Too late, because seros means late. So, yeah, a very complicated sentence. It would be very difficult to follow exactly what Cicero's point is and what he's most afraid of in here. But I think they would get the sounds and they would get this idea, in particular, this idea of either being too cruel or too late, of acting too slowly or acting in a rather tyrannical and cruel and violent way, by putting Catiline to death, because Cicero does have the extreme decree in his hand, so he could declare martial law. He could have Catiline arrested and executed. He's chosen not to do this, and so he's a little bit worried about this this too late business here. And these omnes boni, now that doesn't just mean all good people. It's not a vague expression. This refers to the people in his party. This refers to his supporters, which are the optimates. We're going to learn who those guys are. They are the party of the senatorial class, the established party, the old families, versus the populares, the popularists, the populists, who are trying to foment this revolution. One more thing I want to point out, this of course is subjunctive, because it is in this ne, non, this clause of fearing. And then within that subjunctive, indirect statement here too. So an awful lot going on here. Two indirect statements. So perfect passive infinitive here. And then present passive infinitive here. Lots of balance and lots of contrast.